Hi guys, this is Jason with Banner Properties. As a land investor, a question that I get asked often is how do you find the acreage for a piece of land? Maybe it's your house in your yard and you'd like to know without looking up the county maps or plats. Maybe it's just something you're looking at and the person has told you it's a certain acreage and you'd like to confirm that. Whatever the reason might be, maybe even because the county restrictions, you want to know the minimum acreage for having livestock. You want to know if you have enough land. Whatever the reason is, there's a quick way to do this, but the title of this video is a bit deceptive. It is not easy to do it on Google Maps. So you can do it on Google Maps. You can measure and you can draw out lines for the sides of the property, but then you have to calculate the square footage of the property and convert that to acreage. That requires some math. I don't know about you, but I was never a math whiz. So I'm going to show you two simple ways that you can do this very quickly without having to do any math whatsoever. The first is using Google Earth. Google Earth you have to download onto your computer. There is a mobile version, but it doesn't have as many features, so you wouldn't be able to do this on the mobile version. But you can download it to your desktop for free. It's a great tool to have. One of the neat things is with Google Earth is that you can actually see the contours, so you can kind of see the hills and the topography of the land you're looking at. But let's just say in this place and somewhere in the United States, we want to measure the acreage of this person's house and yard. So we just go here to the polygon button right here on the menu. It's right to the right of the thumbtack button. And it says add polygon. We click on that. Little box comes up. Just leave that dialog box there. Don't close it out. And then I click at my point of beginning where I want to start. And then you do need to know roughly the area or the property lines. I can see what looks like a fence here. So I'm assuming that's a property line. I'm going to put it about here between these houses. And it simply draws what's called a polygon, which basically looks like a square. And then what we're going to do here in the dialog box is click on measurements. And you can choose how these read out. It could be in hectares if you're in somewhere in Europe or in another country, square feet, square yards, square miles, or acres. In this case, it's acres. And as you can see right here, it's 0.57 acres. So this is just over a half an acre lot. So sometimes you hear people saying, I have a half acre lot or I have an acre lot. But let's try this with another piece of property. So what do you do if you want something that's curved? Like you can see this field right here that we're looking at, it has some curves. We just do the same thing, but we just have to click out a lot more lines along the edges. So every time I click a line closer together, if the curve is sharper, I could just go ahead and follow that and it will draw the polygon all the way around with me, which is really cool because properties are not always cookie cutter rectangles or squares. In many cases, there are all different shapes and sizes of properties in the US. So that's not perfect. You could take your time and do it just a little more careful than I did there. But let's just go ahead and see that, yes, this field is 3.62 acres. So it's a little over 3.5 acres in this field. And it gives you a great idea of what it looks like. Maybe you want to know the size of a lake. You could actually measure the size of a lake and figure out how many acres your pond or lake is using this method. So that's the first method, and that requires a download of Google Earth. But there's another method that's free and you can do online very quickly with no downloading of any software whatsoever. And it's findlotsize.com. Findlotsize.com. Just type it in, pull it up, and this is very simple. You can choose distance or area. So if you just want to draw a line and see the distance, you can use that. And here I am at just some random location in the US. Looks to be a school or a church or some commercial building here. And there's a residential neighborhood here to the side, and there's this nice looking field here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the rectangle of this field. What I do is I simply hold down Shift, and then I find the corner of the field, and I put my first marker there, and I can just keep Shift held down on my keyboard, and I put the next marker, and I go ahead and follow the edges of the field. And then I scroll down and it says area, and here it is. It shows you in kilometers and meters and feet and all kinds of things. But there it is, AC for acres, 7.9859. So it's pretty precise. Now, who knows if I have my dots in the exact location of the borders of the field. You might want to zoom in a little closer and do that a little more carefully. And keep in mind that this is a satellite measurement, so it's not the same as a survey that would be done on the ground. So your variation, your measurements may vary a little bit from what the deed of your property actually says, but it gives you a general idea. This is almost just about 8 acres in this field. So that's what an 8-acre property looks like. Okay, so very simple way that you can measure the acreage of your property. No math is required. It's completely done for you, either through Google Earth or through findlotsize.com. I hope this video has been a help to you, and I hope you continue to connect with us and all of our land videos here on Check Lands. If you have a property that you'd like to sell, feel free to fill out the form on our site, and we will give you a cash offer for that property within 24 hours. Thank you, and God bless. Hey there, this is Jason with Banna Properties, and as a land investor, often when I buy properties, I get a lot of people that want to sell their property or maybe own land, and they think that the layout of the land is such. Maybe they haven't visited the property in a long time, or sometimes they inherited the property and they never have seen it. Or maybe they're going to buy the property and they have an expectation that the property looks like such because they saw it on a map. Now, in today's video, I want to show you some tools on how to check the topography of your land. Now, topography is a big word. I remember when I was in Boy Scouts, there was actually a merit badge for orienteering, and we had to learn how to read maps, and we had to learn a little bit about topography. That was probably the only time in my entire childhood that I heard the word topography. But maybe you've heard of topographical maps. I'm going to cover that today. What this word means is basically the layout of the earth, what it looks like, what the lay of the land looks like. Is it flat? Is it hilly? What does it look like? So how could you find out if you own a piece of land, or maybe you're looking to buy a piece of land, or maybe you have a piece of land and you think, is it worth anything? Could I use it for the purpose I want, or should I sell it? How can you find out what that property looks like without being there? Okay, there are a couple ways you can do this online. The best way, obviously, is to go visit the property and walk it. But even having these maps and these little tricks up your sleeve will help you navigate, especially a larger piece of acreage, when you do go visit it. So the first thing that we're going to cover here today, we need to go to Google Earth. Okay, now Google Earth Pro is a free download. Many of you on your phone probably use Google Maps. Maybe you put something in Google Maps and it'll give you directions while you're driving. It's a very handy tool. You can actually download on your phone Google Earth as well, but it won't have the features on your phone that I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so if you're an outdoorsman or you own land and you want to go explore it or you want to see about it, you need to download Google Earth Pro for free onto your computer. All right, so we've downloaded it, and I have a piece of property here. This is a 12-acre property in Missouri, and we want to look at this property. So you can see the layout of this is kind of unique. There's some road going around it. And as we look at the property, we can see, oh, that's neat. These are the roads and the names, and there's some fields, and here's the lake. I believe this is Lake of the Ozarks, or one of the branches of Lake of the Ozarks. And as we pull in, you might think, wow, what a beautiful wooded property. I imagine myself out there camping, and maybe I'll clear out this section and make a garden, and maybe I'll do a little deer hunting out there. You imagine that, but we're not sure what this property actually looks like on the ground. So we don't want to be surprised and buy something or go out there and visit it and we don't know what it looks like. So the very first thing you're going to do is, this is probably the simplest way to do this, is to click Layers button over here on the bottom left, and it opens another menu. And there's a button here that says Terrain. Go ahead and click Terrain, and it will activate the terrain filter here on Google Earth. Now, this is a pretty neat tool, because as I zoom in, and what I'm doing, I'm just scrolling my mouse scroller up. As I zoom in, it's starting to take an angle, and I'm starting to see oh, that property's not flat. Actually, it's quite rolling. There's a hill right in the center of it. Okay, actually, it looks like there's sort of this road is way down in a ditch here. So there's quite the fall here. This is kind of a mountainous area. Now, this would be to expect. It's to be expected. We are talking about the Ozarks, which is quite a hilly and mountainous region. But let's go ahead and with this filter on, I'm just gonna go ahead and scroll around and kind of look at the 360 view of this property. Very interesting. Okay, now the closer I get, the better I'm going to be able to see how this property is laid out. Now remember, this is Google Earth. It's not as accurate. It's not a survey. It could have a mistake, but it will give you a general idea and expectation. So you can see that this road is going downhill toward the lake pretty severely. And we can see there's quite a hill here. It doesn't look like there's actually much of a flat place on this property, right? So that is using the terrain filter. So I can really see how the lay of the land is. And you can just click and drag it, which is what I'm doing, scrolling around here to take a better look at the property. Okay, now let's go ahead and get back to our map view. Let's say we want to know a little more accurately how this property lays out. With the tree cover, you can't see it that well through Google Earth. So we want to know what this region looks like on the ground. And this is where we find a topographical map. Now, a topographical map is a map that was made that shows the contour lines of the Earth. Okay, now they could be a little confusing, but I'm going to explain it to you. So first thing I'm going to do is here in Places, I actually went to a website. Okay, I went to earthpoint.us and I'll show it to you here. Now they do offer some paid subscriptions on this website, but if you go to TopoMap, you can see free. User account is not needed. So I don't actually need to pay for this, which is quite neat. So this is totally free. And you just can click this to view it on Google Earth. I've already done that. It'll download a filter. And it will show up here when you click on Places, EarthPoint Topo Map. So it's a topographical map. I'm going to go ahead and click that filter. And sometimes it'll take a minute to load. It'll kind of show you these little loading symbols. Now it is a little blurry. It's not that clear. But you can see immediately that there is an overlay of a topographical map. Now, something to remember in topography is the closer the lines are together, the steeper the fall. So these lines over here that are really wide, that means that this is pretty much flat or it has a very slight slope. And where the lines are closer, the slope gets sharper. So if we were to look up here, these are probably those hay fields that we saw on the map. We go ahead and take the filter off. Yep, here's the fields. They're pretty well flat. Just a little bit of fall to them. But if we look down here where our property is, there's almost this type of a ravine that's coming down here. You can see these lines, there's a fairly sharp fall or a hill, comes down a hillside and then it kind of goes through here. There probably is some sort of a creek that goes along that road, draining water out, I imagine, during rains. And then you can see what looks like our property. It actually has a couple different little ravines or ridges, and then there's this higher ridge in the center. So you can see these wavy lines are showing the contour, and the closer the lines, the sharper the fall. So I'll give you a perfect example of that. Here it says Horse Thief Bluff, okay, right along the lake, and you can see how sharp these lines are. They're very sharp here. Now let's go ahead and take this filter off. And let's zoom back down. Remember, we do have the filter already on here for the topographical stuff or the terrain. And you can see that there's a very steep bluff here. It's almost like a treed cliff. These houses here, they probably don't want to go beyond their yard or they might fall down into the lake. So you can see that was those very sharp lines. That's very hard to walk. So the tighter the lines are with Google Earth, the harder it is going to be to walk. So that can give us a much better perspective of what the property and the area actually looks like. And that topographical map will show certain roads and waterways as well. All right, so it's just a very simple free tool that you can use to look at your property and get a realistic idea of what the lay of the land is. Now, if you have a property and you say, you know what, I'd like to sell this property. I'm not using it, or I don't like the layout of it. It's not going to work for my purposes. We would love it if you would go ahead and submit that property on our website. There's a form here where you can submit the property for a cash offer. We take a look at it. We also pass that to other vetted land investors in our network, and we will respond to you with an offer to purchase your property. All right, thank you. I hope this video has been a great help to you. Have a great day. Hi, this is Jason with Banna Properties. Today I wanted to make a quick video to answer the question, what does a land surveyor provide for my land? When you're buying land, or maybe you own land, or you're even thinking about selling land, and you hear the word a survey, oftentimes in the transaction of buying or selling land, that term is exchanged. A survey and a surveyor, and usually the only thing that we actually know is that this is going to cost us money. So I wanted to take a minute to tell you what you're going to spend your hard-earned cash on if you order a land surveyor to do a survey of your land. Okay, so let's jump right in. Now, there are more than two types of surveys, but the two most common types of surveys for land, particularly residential or vacant land, we're going to talk about today. The first is a boundary survey. Now, 9 times out of 10, you're going to order a boundary survey, or need to order a boundary survey, or you have a boundary survey of the land in question. Okay? A boundary survey is simple. It establishes the property boundary lines. It shows where the corners of the property lines are in a parcel according to the deeded legal description or the original subdivision that is on plat and recorded with the county. Right? Boundary surveys are actually going to show you physically on your land, using stakes and markings, where the property lines are, and they're usually needed when you're going to pull a building permit for putting a fence up, or if there's a property line dispute between you and a neighbor, possibly of where the property line actually lies, or oftentimes before you're going to build, because you need to know the offset of how close to the property line you can build. Okay, this is probably the most common. I have some good news too. It's usually the cheaper of these two types of surveys. So that's most of the time, probably 90% of the time, what you're going to need, or what people are talking about on a survey for land. All right, another type of survey that is common and is often used for land, particularly when you're going to develop the land, is a topographical survey. Now, some people like to get a topographical survey of a property they own because they want to know the topography. They want to actually see the study of the layout. Sometimes you can buy a piece of parcel that's maybe 10 or 20 acres, but if it's rolling topographically, it can actually have more surface area and more acreage. But usually a topographical survey will locate the improvements on the property, if there's a house, a shed, or other topographical features. For instance, if there's a ridge, if there's a waterway or a creek or a river, an embankment, things like that. And it will show the contours of the property or the topography of the property, including things like roads and ditches and utilities. Right? This is more work to do for the surveyor. They have to put oftentimes thousands of readings they have to take across the property, so therefore it costs more to do. All right, so let's just jump into the next step. If I hire a boundary survey, so we're going to talk about that one in this video. If I hire a boundary survey done, or order a boundary survey done for my land, what's that process going to look like? What is it going to entail? So the surveying process is simple. And the first step is that the surveyor is going to come out to your property physically, right? Now there are other surveying practices like paper surveys where they just plat it out on paper. But when we talk about a boundary survey, they have to come out physically to the property, right? They're going to use a tool, which you see here in this picture in the top left, which is called a total station, right? And the surveyor is going to measure through the total station. He's going to have a helper that holds a prism, which is kind of a similar thing, but on a stick. And he's going to mark different points using that. Now, in the legal description of your property, if it's already has a meets and bounds legal description, or somewhere in the original deed or plat process, usually there are angles that are measured. And I'm going to show you in just a second on a couple of samples of surveys. And what he's doing with the total station is he's actually measuring the angles and the distances to various points around the property line. Remember, not every piece of property is a perfect square or rectangle. Oftentimes there are all kinds of crazy shapes. And so they're measuring those points, right? The second thing they're going to do is mark these points with precision, right? Remember, you can look at the county GIS maps, and that's just a satellite surveying map. It's not precise. They're going to show it with precision, and they're going to stake that with rods, iron pipe, or surveyor stakes. So there's a picture here of a surveyor stake. Those were very common back in the day. Sometimes they use capped rods now. So oftentimes they'll use a 5/8 cap rod. It's not going to be wood, because that would obviously rot and not last. It's always something metal or built to last through the weather, okay? Now sometimes a surveyor, if you ask them, will also, between these points, put flags, some sort of a tape along a tree or somewhere to kind of give you a general idea of where that property line runs. But that's not the legal marking. The stakes themselves or rods are going to be the marking. And then they're going to go back to their office with their reading, and they're going to actually draw out in a program called AutoCAD, and they're going to draw out the map showing all the details, the angles, and the measurements, and they're going to give you a survey, which is actually a map, showing all of this information. So let's just jump into the next slide. I'm going to show you a couple of samples of surveys. These are just random samples I found on the internet, but I thought they showed a good example of it. So as you can see here, on this survey, you can see these points, and there's a legend over here, and the legend says existing fence. It will show the roads. You can see Timberline Road, and so usually a survey is going to look something like that. If there's some points of reference like a roadway or an existing fence line, oftentimes, since they've actually walked the property and studied it and marked it, they're going to mention those. Okay, and then these round points are showing staked locations. So in this particular one, it says they found an iron rod, the round point here at the top with the square inside. So that was an existing iron rod that they found, that was a marker. It looks like that one was in the middle of the street. Okay, and this is pretty common because properties oftentimes own land out into the street and where there's an actual easement across the property for that street to cross it. And then you can see other points that they have marked. Okay, and this shows the angles, and it shows the acreage, all right? Now, notice that this is called a boundary survey, even though it's kind of sideways here. You can see it is a boundary survey. It does have a stamp or a seal here for the surveyor. Surveyors are licensed professionals in the state that they work. Maybe if they're really near the border between two states, they might be licensed in both states or have people in their office licensed in both states. But it's important that the survey or the plat of survey that they give you, this map right here, is sealed and signed properly for the county level. Okay, let's look at another example, a little bit clearer here. This is one from Texas of a smaller piece of property, but you can see that they've actually, it says right here, unless otherwise shown, all corners are 5/8 iron rods. So these little dots along here are 5/8 iron rods. So they're out there marked where if a person were to walk and look through the grass or look along the ground, they could find these iron rods and therefore figure out where they need to put their fence if they wanted to fence this property. Now it looks like this one has a house on it, so there's some drawing here with an asphalt drive and some other things, and a storage shed. So it looks like they made a plan of a lot that has a house on it, okay? And there's even a detail here of the house itself on this particular survey. Now, notice that these say North 64. These are the meets and bounds, or basically the angles that were drawn in these lines, how they're running. Okay, it also has the angles that's running. So let me tell you how you read these. It says north 51 degrees, 18 minutes, 39 seconds east, and it's 74.25 feet. So from this point to this point, between 2 points, that's the distance, right? Every surveyor is going to use meets and bounds or angles to draw that out. Now, sometimes those are written on the deed itself for the property in a long legal description. Sometimes they're not, but that's what he does with the total station. He's measuring these angles and distances so he can find the property lines. Once again, this has got a seal, and this is going to be completed with the information for the surveyor, the property information. Oftentimes, they'll even have a legal description. If we notice the previous one up here at the top, it had a legal description, 4 tracts of land being part of the northeast quarter of Section 7 and part of the northwest quarter of Section 8, etc., etc. This is something that will then be put into the deed if they're subdividing it, or is already on the deed if it's already subdivided. Okay, so that is what a surveyor is going to provide you. If you order a boundary survey, they're going to come out to your property, physically measure and mark and stake the property. You will be able to find those stakes. Do not move them. Keep track of their location and keep them there for future reference, or even for a future property owner if you sell the property. And one last important thing is sometimes a surveyor will do it for you, but don't forget to ask if you need to record the survey with the county. All right, this is something that's important. Oftentimes we've had people that have had their property surveyed in the past, or a previous owner surveyed it, spent maybe $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, or sometimes even more, depending on the property size, to survey the property, but because they didn't record it with the county, and they forgot to give those survey documents to the new owners, it's been lost and it has to be done again, right? So don't do that, right? Now, if you have property that you'd like to sell, and maybe you say, Jason, I don't want to pay for a survey. I don't want to go through all this hassle. Do I have to have it to sell my property? Absolutely not. You don't. We buy property all the time without a survey. If it's needed, we'll order the survey and pay for it ourselves. So if you have a piece of property and you'd like to sell it, please visit the form here on the site and put in your property information, and we would love to give you a quote on that property within 24 hours. All right, thank you for watching, and I hope this video has been a help to you. Hi, this is Jason with Banna Properties. As a land investor, I'm often asked by people, how do I read an easement on my survey? So maybe you own a piece of land and you're trying to find out exactly where the easement is. This is a great question, and I hope to answer that question today to the best of my ability. But before we answer that, what is an easement? Now, easements can have some difficult language to understand. If you just do a quick search about easements, you'll see words like dominant and tenient, or dominant and servient, public and private. And that can be very confusing. So I want to just summarize today in this video that an easement provides a legal right for access. Right? In the United States, in order to cross someone's private property, there needs to be an easement in place that provides a right for that access. Typical easements that a landowner might have would be for a roadway or a driveway to cross your property. For instance, if a neighbor had an easement for access and their driveway or that roadway, even a county roadway, crosses your property at some point, you would have an easement. Another very common one is for a utility company to put power lines or to lay a sewage pipe, a sewage main, or possibly a gas line or a water line to cross your land to provide service for others in the area. Sometimes even drainage rights can be based on an easement across your property. And then the final thing is for you to cross someone else's property in order to access your property. Now, how can I find the easements? How will I know if the property has an easement, and where should I look? All right, so there are 3 simple places you can look. And the very first one is to look in the legal description of your deed. So when you buy a property or sell a property, the transaction's done through a deed, and the deed has a legal description. Properties are not bought and sold based on their street address. Matter of fact, in vacant land, very few properties even have in rural vacant land a street address. So you look at the legal description of your deed, and you can see usually that the easements will be mentioned there. Here's a perfect example. Here's a warranty deed for a property in Texas. And as you can see, Township 10, Block 67, this is all the legal description. Right underneath the legal description, it says 10 acres more or less, reserving a 30-foot wide easement for ingress, egress, utilities, and pipe lines around the property and over any existing roads or pipelines. The easement is for use of all owners in this township and in this block. All right, so this is an easement that is 30 feet wide that goes around the 4 borders of this particular property. These are fairly common in this area of Texas and West Texas where this property is located. And this is a public easement. It's not a private easement. It's open for all other property owners in the area. It also provides access for utilities. So if a roadway needed to be put in there with power lines next to it, and it could fit in the 30-foot wide swipe of property, they could very well do that legally. All right, so this is a simple deeded easement. Now, what does this look like from the deed into the actual plat of the property? Here's a lot plan for this particular property, and as you can see, it says a 30-foot easement for access and utilities. So this is around the border of the property, along the entire border. Now in this particular area of Hudspeth County, Texas, all the properties have these same easements, which essentially provides a 60-foot wide access point in any which way or in any direction for a person that needed to access their property. Right? This is one way that you could find it on your deed. Sometimes the wording won't be as simple as this one, but the first place to look is on your deed. Now, the second place that you can look for an easement is to look on your land survey. In another video, I've talked about what a land survey is, what it looks like, and what a surveyor does when they come out to survey your property. But if you already have a survey that's been done and you have the map or the plat of survey and you have it in hand, you can look and locate the easements there because the surveyor will find the easements on record and he will locate them and draw them out on that survey. So this is a quick example of what this looks like. This is a residential lot, and you can see there's quite a few lines and it can be a little confusing, but it says 10-foot ease or easement. A little further over it says 18-foot easement. So these are easements that go along a roadway there. You can also see up top on the north end of this property, you can see a sanitary or sewage easement that's crossing. It even says just a little further over that there's a manhole up here for this easement. So that's an easement probably for a main sewer line that's crossing in that area. This is a house, so most likely it's going to the neighborhood. Right, here's another example of a frame dwelling, which I'm assuming is a house, and another one. And between these two dwellings or houses, you can see a right-of-way, which is an easement, and it actually says that it's 3.5 feet and 3.5 feet, which would make it 7 feet wide, and then it has the length we could calculate. And so you know there that this is probably a shared driveway. All right, so you can look, you've looked in the legal description of your deed, you've checked the land survey. Where else could you potentially look for an easement? Now it's possible that you could miss an easement, especially a utilities easement, in these two places, one that was put on deed later. So you would want to call the county recorder and ask if there are any easements on file for the property. You'd give them the name that's on deed or on title, and they would look it up in the county records. Sometimes it's the county clerk, sometimes it's called the county recorder, depending on your state and the area of the country you're in, and they will find anything on file. I recently called about a property. It didn't show it on the survey or on the legal description, but they did have a utilities easement on file. So what does that mean and what does that look like? At some point during the ownership of the property, someone possibly before you, or maybe this has even happened as you own the property if you've owned it for a while, the utility company says, we'd like to cross your property with some power lines, or we'd like to run a gas line across your property, and we need your permission to do it. Now, oftentimes when the utility company is bringing in services like city water and things that are a benefit to the property owners, oftentimes the property owners will give them an easement for free. However, there are some cases where they'll actually offer a monetary fee for the easement, and they'll pay you in order to file this easement on your property. And then that easement is then filed directly by them, and there's a document there to prove it. So when you call the county recorder, maybe you'll find a map that looks like this. Now this is, it says for a plat of survey for a big oil company. So I'm assuming that this is for an oil line or a gas line some sort of a pipeline that was going to cross some different properties. But this would be a sample of what a utility easement survey looks like. Oftentimes they'll have a surveyor draw up all the properties that utility is going to cross. They'll then get permission and they'll have you sign, or the previous owner would have signed something, and then they record that at the county level, which shows publicly that they have permission to access and work on the lines and cross your private property, or to establish or dig and put in their lines across this private property. So this is the final place you would look for it, and these are a few different ways that you can locate an easement on land that you own, right? If you have a piece of property that you'd like to sell, I would encourage you to go on the form here on our site and fill out your property information. If you'd like to sell it, we would love to make you a cash offer for that property. I hope that this video has been helpful to you. Thank you so much. God bless. Hey you guys, this is Jason here with Banna Properties, and I just wanted to make a quick video about how to vet a land company. So some of you maybe are looking to sell a piece of land and a land investor or a land company has reached out to you, someone possibly like myself, about buying this. They want to make a cash offer or buy your property from you, and you have that doubt. How do I know that they're legit? How do I know that they're not a scammer? That's a very important question. Maybe you're trying to buy a piece of property and you're talking to someone and looking at listings on the internet, and you want to make sure that they're legit. I'm going to give you a few quick tips today about how to vet the land company themselves. In another video, I'll cover how to do your due diligence on a property you're going to buy. There's a few more steps, but in a few quick steps today, I want to talk about some things that you could look out for to make sure that you're talking to a legitimate company that is actually buying and selling land legally in the United States, not some scammer on the other side of the world. So things to look out for. The very first thing is pretty simple. If they are a legitimate land company, they're going to have an online presence. Now, I will say that this doesn't necessarily mean that if you Google them, they come up at the top of the list, because people pay for Google ads to show up at the top. But somewhere online, they're going to have a presence, meaning they should have some sort of a buying website, a selling website, maybe in the signature line of their emails, or if you ask them about that, or wherever you're seeing the advertising, you should be able to find out about them. Maybe that website has star rankings, maybe it doesn't, but let's just quickly pull up here. I'll show you. In my case, this is a website that I have for people that are trying to sell their properties. This website will probably come up if you Google Banna Properties, because it's been out there for a few years. So it's been there for a while. You can see Banna Properties is right there. There's all the information, contact and whatnot, and you click here, and this just takes you to a form that if you fill it out, will send me an email in order to receive your information about the property. On the other side, I have this website. This has my updated logo. It's a little bit newer website that I've built where we sell our properties. We offer properties that we are actually selling. You can see this here. Featured properties. There's a picture of myself here and my wife. It talks about us, and you can see that we are real people. All right. So other things to look out for. Another good sign would be reviews. So sometimes on the person's website, or sometimes they have a Google review for the company. Now, that is not the only thing to look out for, because these things could be just faked, or they could be manipulated, but they are good symbols to look out for initially. Another thing that's possibly a Better Business Bureau rating. Now, I say possibly because not all land companies have Better Business Bureau ratings. The Better Business Bureau is actually a paid membership, so businesses have to pay to be a part of it, to be in their rating system. So many companies don't do that. I know myself, with my company, we are not in the Better Business Bureau because of this, just the continuing fees. We didn't think it was worth it. However, that is something you can look out for. It's not the only thing, but it is something, and it would be favorable, obviously, to have a good rating and see any reviews or any complaints that are there. Now, I've put these next three things in a little bit of darker, bolder letters, because these are things that are non-negotiables. Those first three are good. They're positives. in favor if they have them. But there are solid land companies that don't have them. However, these last three are non-negotiables. So if you're looking to vet a land company, you need to make sure that these last three all work out. So you're going to talk to a real person. And this might be a phone conversation. You might call. I know, for instance, I have a call center that accepts many of our initial calls, but then I call back people myself. Another thing is you can oftentimes reach out through an email. Somehow you're having a conversation with a real person, and you're going to know that you're talking to a real person and not a scammer in Nigeria once you get into the conversation. And then another symbol of that is professional communication. So it's not sounding, the person that's calling you and talking about it, they're a professional. In our communication, we're courteous, we're kind, we do our very best to use good grammar, and it's a professional, whether it's by email, which I use for a lot of my communication with people selling their land, or on the phone. We're going to be professional in the treatment of you. We're not some scammer on the street, and that's something important to look out for. Usually the red flags are very visible when you're talking to someone that's not legit right away in the communication and in how that's framed. And then the very, very important, these are probably the top thing that you need to make sure to check, and I'm going to show you today on this video how to check them yourself, is a certificate of good standing. You can request this from the company. If you have any doubts, ask them for a certificate of good standing for their corporation, their LLC or S Corp, or however they're organized in the state that their company is organized. Certificate of good standing, and you're going to check the Secretary of State company lookup. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick example of what this looks like. So my company, Banna Properties LLC, we are organized in the state of Wyoming. Now, many times a land company like ourselves are organized in one state, and we buy and sell land in many other states. So we don't only buy and sell land in Wyoming, we buy and sell land in dozens of other states. That's perfectly normal, but there is a state where that company calls home and has been organized legally, and they keep up that organization and stay in good standing with that state. So a simple question you could ask if you have any doubts or you're trying to verify a land company is what state is your corporation or your company organized in? And they should be able to tell you that. You can ask them to provide you with a certificate of good standing. Very, very rarely do scammers even know what this is or take the time to try to make one of these. This is something that's requested from the state. It has the state seal on it. And is given to a company that is organized within that state. So quick look at it here. It just says Banna Properties LLC, limited liability company. You can see here that we were organized under the laws of Wyoming in 2017, and the duration is perpetual. And you can see the seal here and the Secretary of State's signature. Now, you might say to me, that's great, Jason, I've taken these steps, but I want to go one step further, and I want to verify with the Secretary of State. I want to make sure that they didn't falsify this document. They're not trying to pull the wool over my eyes. Good for you. I applaud you for that, for your thoroughness. So it's very simple. You're going to go to Google. In this case, you want to look up my company. Here's the Wyoming Secretary of State Business Search. Okay, so you can just go ahead, Wyoming Secretary of State Business Search. Here you can see Texas, Nevada, Montana, all these others show up. Whatever state that the land company in question claims they're organized in, you go ahead and you can just search for that. And the first thing to pop up here is Business Entity Search, Wyoming Secretary of State. Okay, so you can go ahead and click on that button, and it will take us to the Wyoming Secretary of State's website. We just make sure it's the real government website. It is .gov. Okay, and we're going to search. So we're going to go ahead and search for Banna Properties LLC, which is what shows up on my websites and everything, because that's our legal business name. Now, there are businesses that have one legal business name, and then they have a DBA, or a doing business as name as well. So you could possibly look up that as well. And then I just click search. Okay, and I've already actually done that here. And this is what happens when you click search. It pops up with all the matching active companies. You can see Banna Properties LLC right here. Now it already tells us tax standing is good and the company standing is good and the status is active. So it also tells us when it was started, which was 2017. So we know that my company has been around for 4 years, that it's still active. We didn't, dissolve a couple years ago and are doing business falsely. Our standing is good with the state, meaning that it's not in litigation, there's not some other problem and the state has had an issue with, and that we're not owing a bunch of back taxes to the state that we haven't paid. But once you click this, it will actually pop up this window and you can see these details even clearer. So here it is, the name of the company, the filing ID, the type of the company, and you can see here that it's active and current, the filing date, term or duration. Someone could possibly set up a company that's supposed to last for a year. In some commercial real estate deals, just for a deal, they'll set up the company and then they'll dissolve it. That's not the case here with us. And you can see our tax standing, our other standings are all good. Now, if the company has a doing business as or a DBA, it will say under here fictitious name. So let's say I was doing business as Get Land in the USA or Great Land or some other name, then it would show up here. I would file that and it would show up here, and that way you would know that you're looking at the right company. Okay, and you can see some other additional details and things here which aren't necessarily needed for this initial search, but this quick search, which takes you about 5 to 10 minutes, tells you that they are a company in good standing in the state of organization and that they're still active and in good standing. And it's always a good thing to take your time and search. And always you can check out the online presence and the certificate of good standing and all of those things. Okay, I hope that these tips can help you in your search to verify or vet a land or an investing company. If you're looking to sell land, please fill out the form on our website. We would love to take a look at your property and give you a cash offer within 24 hours on that property. In any other way that we can help you, we hope that we can, and we hope that you have great success in selling or buying the land of your dreams. Thank you so much.